the next is Nanette, and she is driving. And I think Nanette said General. I'm scrolling back up trying to find it. Nanette will be with us as well, Radiant Reiki, at the winery.
What else did Nanette want?
I believe she wanted just a general since she's, yep, a general.
Okay. So, Nanette, what does Nanette need to know?
Oh, that's awesome. Jacobia says that makes sense. So his reading is pretty spot on there.
At least it's not a 6. But for any of you who've ever done stuff like this before, you know that like there ends up being a theme for everyone who comes in at once. Savannah and I, one of the other readers who will be at the winery, who lives fairly close to me, we're the only two that live in the same town that are also like forever away from the shop. She and I have discussions all the time during like the winery about how like there was one major theme, there was one card or one issue that seemed like everyone you saw that day was going through. So if we had to put a theme on this one, I think it's like crossroads, decision making, turning points. And I think everyone's going to get out of it perfectly fine and unscathed. It's just having the courage and the spine to get through it. Not spawns.
Yeah, it's just the collective energy.
Okay. Nanette, what else do you need to know? Okay. So, one of the dice landed outside of the circle.
But only one.
Only one. So you will have a couple obstacles. You will have some like things that you're gonna hit. 6, 4, so 10. We have promotion, joy, new beginnings, new birth. That read together kind of tells me, again, you know, there's going to be some opportunities there. There's going to be some options available to you, and it's going to be another one of those sitting down, taking it into consideration very seriously, weighing your options. I think that's what the difficulty for you is going to be specifically, is like just, it's not so much difficulties as it is like a pause. You're kind of in suspension, and during that suspension, it's like you're weighing your options. Like, should I do this? Should I not do it? Should I take this? Should I not take it? And figuring out the pros and cons of that. This definitely has a more positive tone. It's just a weighing of options. We have El Mundo, the world. This carries the connotation of two things. One, feeling like the world is on your shoulders and feeling like the weight of expectations are kind of like crushing. But realizing at the same time that you have the world on your shoulders. It's not in the palm of your hand. It's at your back. You've done everything you can do. Now it's doing what you want, doing what feels right to you. You don't have to do things for others. This is for you. This is what you want. It's your time. You're the shot caller now. It's a message of having confidence in oneself and being the determiner of what's to come next. All of the power is yours.
Just a little bit that Nanette and I have talked, like this seems like it's hitting pretty well. Yeah, she says that resonates with the options and feeling the weight of my shoulders for sure.
Yeah. What is it? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. You're wearing the crown, but you're feeling the weight of that as well. Making those decisions is not an easy thing. It's terrifying when it's like, this is just this much out of reach, but it's like, it's another situation of coming out of your comfort zone. Like, you're invested with this power and you have the ability to do what you want, but at the same time, while that's like, oh my God, finally I've made it, it's terrifying because it's all dependent on you now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next, we have Karen. Karen wanted an ancestor reading.
Okay. All right. There's a singular, strong female ancestor coming through for Karen, and she's Black. She was a slave. She's wearing like, in Mexico, we call them huipiles. They're called, I think, peasant tops. They're like the white shift, like a white shift. Yeah, this is Karen. I'm not sure what your racial background is, but if you're Black, that's who this is. If you are white, I think this is an ancestor where it was a situation of, I don't want to say it because that gets really dark, but this ancestor definitely is like coming through for to help you connect to ancestral roots, but there's also like a bit of justice. So this is kind of like, if you're going to start doing ancestor work, you need to look into elevation of ancestors, which isn't discussed nearly enough as it should be. The elevation of ancestors is like focusing on one ancestor, holding them accountable for things they've done, or if they're like on the victim end of it, helping that ancestor process that trauma on the other side. And this is through offering of light, which is through candle, the offering of clarity through water, and the physical elevation, usually by stacking books on top of, or a Bible on top of a stack of books, and then covering it with a white cloth. And you can put the glass of water and the white candle on top, and that helps elevate that ancestor. You would state their name and then do prayers for them. And this can be the Our Father, the Hail Mary, this can be personal prayers. But this is an ancestor who definitely more victim than perpetrator. And I think she's coming through again, kind of like for I think it was Brooke. This is like the gateway ancestor. This is the one that's going to help you connect to the other ones. We'll say primary ancestor in terms of like working with them and connecting with them. She's very gentle, she's very kind, she's very patient, she's very nice, but there is like a sense of justice that needs to be accomplished spiritually, or a sense of like processing that needs to be done, and this ancestor needs elevation.
Now, while we wait and see if anybody else has questions, if somebody was wanting to get started on an ancestral altar, like what are basics people need to have? How, like, is there certain placements, certain days of the week?
So it's going to look different depending on whatever your tradition is. My altar is a combination of espiritismo and basic just Mexican folklore. It is a white cloth with a glass of water and a white candle. I also have a white cross, and I keep Bible and then a censer near that as well. And then before approaching, I either wash my hands with holy water or Florida water or rue water or Kananga water, or in this case for my dice, I have tobacco water, some kind of cologne or holy fluid that will purify your hands. So when you're interacting with them in a pure way. It's both symbolic as well as spiritual. You would set up your altar, ideally in a west-facing direction because that's where the sun sets. So that represents like the end of life, the afterlife, the other world. Some people will set it up in the north because that's like toward heaven. But I mean, if you have just like an empty corner, your ancestors will come if you call them. You could be in the middle of a park and they'll show up. But yeah, set up a place where you can at least put a white cloth, a candle, and a glass of water. I know in some traditions they will put it in the corner of a room where the floor and the two walls meet. Some have a setup in a kitchen because it's believed like the water pipes connect down into the ground, and so water, that fluid of life, is connecting down into like the underworld, the graves of the ancestors.
So does it matter the room? I mean, you've already named off a couple rooms in a house, but
some say not in a bedroom because people have sex and it's seen as disrespectful. If your ancestors are peeking at you having sex, they're not ancestors of integrity. I keep mine in my room and I've never had an issue. The only place I would say don't put it, just out of respect, is a bathroom.
I mean, my little one is like right at the side of the couch, and my thought is I'm more likely to remember to honor it if it's right there.
Yeah. A living room or a family room, the place where the family converges, is also probably the best place to put it. I don't think there's a horrible place to put it aside from maybe like a bathroom.
Because I mean, the kitchen could make sense, especially if you're ultimately working with like a grandmother or even a grandfather who liked cooking.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's going to be their favorite place in the house anyway.
Yeah.
Now, in the tradition that I learned with Zane, it was, the 2 white candles, the red candle, the white cloth, the Florida water, you wipe everything down. And if you're using a wooden surface, obviously you're going to want to hurry up and wipe that back up so you're not ruining the varnish. But it's a Monday minimum visit, refill, restock, take care of. Now, is Monday pretty common across the board?
Monday and Sunday. Monday because it's the start of the week, Sunday because a lot of people go to church on Sunday, and so like right after church, they would redo everything because it's kind of like they're still already in a spiritual mindset, so it's like, before getting dinner ready, they would do that.
Homegrown's, like if I place mine, it's in the west facing a graveyard.
That's fine. You're not like placing it in the graveyard. You're not necessarily interacting with anyone at the graveyard. And so long as you have like that delineation that this space is for my ancestors of integrity only, that's going to be honored. There's pros and cons to that if you want to link those two things. Otherwise, they kind of stay separate in and of themselves. People always think like a place has more power or less power if it's near a graveyard. A graveyard is its own existence, just like your home is its own existence. Unless you are actively making offerings at the graveyard and bringing dirt from the graveyard in, like they're separated themselves.
Sandy's like mine's in living room too. I also like the idea of being a living ancestor altar, like wearing the jewelry and the like that belong to my ancestors. I wear a couple rings from a great grandma, and it's actually spoons from her set, and I've used them in my shamanic tradition by charging them for certain things. So, if I lost everything else, like I will shank a bitch for these 2 rings. Like everything else, keep it fine, but I will come for you for these two rings.
The other thing I would suggest is like come up with some kind of mouthpiece for the ancestors. So for me, it's my bones. It's also a penny divination system I developed. And those are just for simple yes/no answers. Typically, I'm doing more of asking for favors from them and honoring them than I'm doing dialogue with them. Typically, if dialogue needs to happen, for me, it happens in the form of omens. Things will keep repeatedly showing up, or like I'll hear something from like a conversation or something that someone says to me, and it's just like a little too on the nose. So it's usually, if there's dialogue that's going to happen, it's that way.
Oh, Jacobius also says, I wear my dearly passed mom's class ring every day. So, I mean, I think wearing the jewelry, or if you have like the pocket watch and stuff, and you're wearing it for the memory and the honor, like that's a special thing.
So that's another thing. My ancestor altar is over here. And then behind me, though, Grandpa's ashes, great uncle's playing cards, father's keychain, and those aren't altars. Literally behind me, it's just books and herbs. And this is not a sacred space. This is just where they go. So you can keep mementos of them, and they don't have to be on like an altar. Whether you have a physical object to connect or not, they're going to be there. I know for some people that is like an important thing, like Jacobius with his ring, you with your rings, Sandy with her jewelry. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've met people where they kind of have these hang-ups. They don't have pictures. They don't have names even. You might not know your ancestors. Your ancestors know you, though. And if you ask them, they will show up.
So let's say somebody has an ancestor that does show up that's like 4 or 5 generations back. You've never met them. Like, what is the proper way to start that honorable communication and finding out if they're the ancestor that you really need to be working with?
Hopefully by the time that happens, you've already established a connection with at least one ancestor, your gateway ancestor, who is kind of like your primary contact. Typically your primary ancestor is going to be someone you knew in life, or someone who is talked about in the family very highly. Not always the case, but I have found it's often the case. They're the ones who you're going to go to verify the other ancestors. And that requires a deep amount of working with them and a deep amount of development of intuition. It requires trust in your divination tool as well, whatever mouthpiece you're using. You'll know through that means, as well as like just your gut feeling, on whether that ancestor who's trying to talk to you is truly your ancestor or an ancestor disguising itself. Maybe it's a hungry ghost disguising itself as your ancestor. I typically don't have that problem because in Buddhism we feed the hungry ghosts, so like they don't need to do any disguising. Like their offerings are there; they can take what they want. Same with land spirits. Jealous land spirits that haven't been fed or honored or taken care of, will disguise themselves as ancestors so that they can take offerings. So without necessarily wanting to go on a tangent, take care of the other spirits in the area as well. Set offerings outside. This is for the hungry ghosts. This is for the land spirits. This is for the pissed off cedars that have been cut down. This is for the land that has been, raised to be used for farmland or a parking lot. Take care of those as well. And they will help in being guardians for other spirits that come in too.
There's a lot of land spirits that get neglected.
Oh, yeah.
And now a lot of traditions don't even necessarily touch on those. Especially like a lot of the newer books, they kind of pigeonhole the information in the book to that one little topic, and they're just going to tell you how to make their altar, how to do this, how to do that. And it seems like they won't even really address if, like, say, Uncle Jimmy Bob, who was a drunk and not a great person, maybe he's not done processing, he shows up. Like, what do you do with him?
So when you begin working with your ancestors, it's very important to state only the ancestors of love and of integrity are allowed in this space. It's kind of like working with a Ouija board. If you go in wanting a thrill, you're going to get a thrill. If you go in simply wanting to talk to someone, that's what's going to show up. If you command at that altar that only the ancestors of love and integrity be present, that's what you're going to get. Generally speaking. Keeping in mind, though, that we all have ancestors that weren't so savory, don't discount them. For two reasons. One, you can either help them by elevating them, or they can come into use later on down the road when someone wrongs you, justifiably. If you have been wronged, asking that ancestor and striking a deal with them is a good way to even out the scales of justice.
Nanette says, I've been told that because I was named after my grandma that passed before I was born, that I have to clear her karma. Also, that I shouldn't ask for her because her vibration is low.
So this is some new age bullshit that drives me up the goddamn wall.
Did a reader say that, or was like other people in the family talking out of the side of their mouth about your poor grandma?
Yeah. Okay, I've been told that because I was named after my grandma that I passed. Okay, here's the thing. Karma is so distorted when it comes to the West. And the fault of a lot of that isn't from the teachers of Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, and Sikhism that came over. It's on the fault of people who weren't listening, who wanted the exoticism to sell a book or a product, and through, generally speaking, white individuals who hopped on the yoga train and never did any study. Karma is cause and effect. Nothing more, nothing less. Karma is solely a person's business. We do have interconnectedness. We do have collective karma, but it is not you now have to pay for the sins of your grandmother. She had her karma to deal with. That's her business. You have your karma to deal with. That's your business. The only karma you share is being born in the same family. You do not have to pay for the sins of the father. What was the other half of that statement?
That she should not ask for her because her vibration is low.
Okay. If her vibration is low and you feel that you agree with that, why is the vibration low? Is it because of drug use? Is it because of abuse that happened to her? And so she developed a personality that was very negative? Again, this is a situation where ancestral elevation comes in. Or if you want to go the other route and not speak to her, but maybe employ her for retribution or protection, the angry ancestors, if you strike a deal with them and you give them something they really want, will do anything to get their end of the deal. So if you say, this was a very abusive ancestor, tell you what, I will give you the alcohol you so much loved in life if you protect this space. They'll do that. But if you want to go the route of elevation, you can do that too. It's your life. They've lived theirs. They've dealt with their karma. How you go about interacting with them is entirely up to you.
Well, I would say as well, like, it probably is worth, and you've already said that you didn't feel anything bad from her, but just because another reader thought that she felt low doesn't mean she's going to feel low to you. And, you know, little soapbox time, like I say every time in the store when somebody's like, oh, that person over there has bad energy. And I'm like, not necessarily. Maybe they came in because they just had a shitty day at work. Maybe somebody just died in their family. Maybe, you know, they've got some stuff going on and they're carrying some heaviness. They came in to feel better, to look for help, and you feel that heaviness. And just because you feel that heaviness, it doesn't make it wrong, doesn't make them negative or a bad person. So that irritates me when people say that all the time.
The other thing I want to add to that is there are some people who have so very well and so very thoroughly accepted the darker parts of this life that sometimes the love and light bitches who over spiritualize everything find that the people whose primary practice is in death or is in the darker deities, that's negative, that's low vibrational. No, you don't like it because you have a bias. That's what it is. That other person is not evil. That other person is not dark. You both are getting to the same end. You both have the same goals in mind. You're just operating in different ways to get there. And that doesn't make one better or less than the other. That doesn't make one good and another evil. Some of us are just better at the darker things in life.
What about breaking, and this has been a key phrase forever, generational curses?
There's more of psychology than spirituality with that. If you're someone who comes from a line of like abusive fathers, eventually that has to come to an end, and that is on the person who decides to do that. Yeah, we could argue it's karma. Yeah, we could argue it's spiritual ascension or transcendence. I think there's more of psychology than spirituality there. It is an active decision to say, this traumatic cycle stops here, it ends with me. And then actively making sure that if you procreate and have children, that you don't continue that.
And like you've already said, you're not responsible for the karma of people before you. So you're just stopping a repetitive learned behavior, which I think is in a way more empowering and less heavy feeling, right? When you think about it that way, like you're responsible for your actions. You can unlearn traditional, you know, abuse that's been done and excused, and, you know, change and teach a new way of being. Homegrown says, if I made a recipe from an ancestor's book and I used it as an offering, what do I do with it when it's done? For example, grandma's grimoire cake.
There was this meme I saw, and it was like, witchcraft will really have you listening to thug rap, driving down a country road, looking for an ideal crossroads.
That's not wrong.
For you, I'm sure it's like death metal, and then like a bag of like candle drippings or something. For me, it's like nails wrapped in cloth, listening to like drift funk while I'm trying to find a crossroads where like the spirits are like a little hungry. Yeah, dispose of it either outside under a tree, give it to nature, make sure everything in it is obviously not poisonous to local wildlife. Dispose of it at a crossroads. Again, make sure there's not going to be danger to anything there. It's not going to contaminate water supply if there's like, I mean, I don't know what would be in there that would be poisonous to a water supply, but just be very cautious. Err on the side of caution. You can simply throw it away. You know, after you give it as an offering, leave it there for maybe a day. It's served its purpose, toss it. It's really up to you.
You know, a lot of people get upset, right? They're like, that's a sacred thing. Why are you just throwing it in the trash? Well, way back when, they didn't have garbage cans and plastic trash bags. You would toss it outside.
Yeah. The other thing is like with candles, people are like, oh my God, the candle, it stopped burning. I have to get a new candle. Candles were very rare and very expensive. They weren't a lot. They didn't have the means to, if a candle stopped burning in the middle of the day, that they had to go get another one. They carved out the wick and reset it.
Right.
They didn't have, you know, $2-3 candles that they could just go and pick up when something snuffed itself out, or because your dumbass loaded it too much with oil and herbs.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's one thing that was cool about my old house. There was like this triangle and we were on this corner. So we had like this little cool little crossroads thing going all the time that I'd just be like, okay.
I have one, so like outside my window, there's like the dirt road, and then there's a little trail that goes one way, and another trail that's traveled enough that you can kind of see indentations. So in a sense, it's like a crossroads. At the very least, it's a T-shaped crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've done stuff in a pinch there.
Karen's like, I've got little dinner mints for an offering, especially for my grandma. They were her favorite. Yeah, using their favorite drinks, candies, food, or even like little, like my one, well, he's still alive, but when he, you know, does pass, like he would always like sit there watching old Westerns and like would whittle. So like a little pocket knife for him and, you know, things that they enjoyed.
Most of my ancestors, it's like coffee, tobacco, and Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm. Crystal Cat's like, yeah, they also threw urine in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
But they use urine for so much stuff.
Mm-hmm. Also, that was like, that was a short-lived thing, throwing waste in the middle of the streets. There were injunctions made to stop people from doing that. Like, we're always saying like people in the medieval times, they were like stupid when it came to medicine. They knew a lot of the cause of why people got sick. They didn't understand it very well, but they knew if you kept waste in the house, it's obviously going to cause a sickness. They didn't know how or why. And so they knew well enough that like, well, if there's a bunch of it in the streets, it's going to cause us to get sick. So like the whole throwing waste outside of a window historically only lasted for like a handful of years before, like, especially in France, I think was the first one. And this may have been prior to the plague or later after the plague. I can't remember. They were like, no, we're done with that. We're stopping that. Quit it.
Yeah. Let's see if we missed any. Yeah. Nanette's like pirate metal and deer skull hawk feathers on my country roads. That's right. I've gone down so many metal rabbit holes on Twitch from different streamers with music and guitar playing. I'm like, this is more fun than gaming, in my opinion.
I'm usually listening to something like, if I'm going to collect stuff, I have a playlist, and it's like Florence and the Machine, like her Lungs and Ceremonials album. Ethel Cain, which is, for any of the Gen Zers and millennials in chat, they'll know who that is. Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy Pride Month, everybody. Now, if somebody, and this is a slight tangent, maybe not, because it's ancestor. People collecting graveyard dirt. Should they not be collecting from their own ancestors after asking permission?
Some people, again, this goes back to the tangibility thing. Having a piece of jewelry, having a photograph, whatever. Some people in some traditions will go to their ancestors and ask for their dirt. I don't see a personal problem with that. That's one very specific way of collecting graveyard dirt. You go there, you ask them, you make an offering, you say thank you, you pick up a few pebbles or like a small handful of dirt, put it in a jar, and like that's your physical contact with that ancestor. I don't see a problem with that. That's like very low level, entry level graveyard collection or graveyard dirt collection. Etiquette for entering a graveyard in general is so nuanced depending on your tradition.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to, in the context of ancestors, collect graveyard dirt from your ancestors' grave, do what I just said. Go there, ask, make sure you have the intuition or use the use of divination tools that is going to confirm that they don't care if you do. Collect the dirt, leave. There's etiquette on entering, there's etiquette on leaving, blah, blah, blah. If this is an ancestor you've had connection with and have been working with, they're going to greet you at the graveyard and they're going to see you out. So you'll be protected, you'll be fine. Do not deviate, because that's where you can get into trouble.
And then you have people like me that used to hang out in all graveyards all the time.
Yes, and
Because
so that
I thought they were calm, quiet, a good place to hang out and just, bullshit with friends. But
that takes me back to like what I was saying earlier. Some of us are just in our practice naturally better at the darker things. So we kind of go into the graveyard welcomed. Again, that's another one of those nuances with graveyards and etiquette. If you are someone like Melissa, like myself, who the bigger parts of our practice deal with death and the acceptance of like the dark stuff in life, you're going to be more welcomed into the graveyard than someone who is just beginning. And that's strictly just because of experience, of know-how, of familiarity. If you're close with death, death's going to recognize you. It's going to be familiar with you. You have permission kind of already to go there. But that's something you develop. It's not like there's a hierarchy there. It's not like I was born special, so I get to forgo all these protocols when going into the graveyard. It's literally just because a lot of my practice deals with death. I'm familiar with it. And so it knows me, I know it. So going into a graveyard is just like saying hello.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been really only uncomfortable in a graveyard or cemetery when there's been other living people, and how they might be behaving. Mm-hmm. And only once have I ever seen something paranormal in it. And it was one that I have been to many times. And it happened to be, a full moon, and it was like a U shape, and there was just like one road in the middle, and my car was parked, farther at this end and sitting way over on the side. And see this, and I'm like, you see that? And friends are like, yep. And I'm like, and of course it's going towards the car. I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, watch this car not start now. But it did. I'm like, and we're going home for the night. Thanks, guys. But
yeah, of all the graveyards I've been in, I've never had like a bad time. Nothing bad's ever happened. A lot of like looking back, again, my practice centers a lot on ancestors. It centers on death. And I would even go so far as to say it centers on sex, death, and magic. And there are deities, especially in like Mexican and in African traditional religions, where there are spirits that when they encapsulate at least one of those things, you see they encapsulate all three of them. If you look at, for instance, Tezcatlipoca, he deals with divination. He deals with the dark arts, as it were. He's also highly sexual, highly magical, and very destructive. There's death there. Those three things often go together. And so I feel like if you work with any deity that deals with those things, you're gonna fall into the other two.
I think a lot of people are just listening to the conversation. Feel free for questions, comments. Otherwise, we'll just
concerns, condemnations.
And let's back up a minute and not make it sound like, you're going to be unwelcomed in the cemetery, right? And I think that unwelcome is kind of like that uncomfortable feeling. The energy of the cemetery is going to recognize that you feel anxious, that you have trepidation, and that's the whole, like, you're not ready yet. And it's
Yeah.
not a I don't like you, it's you're not ready yet.
Oh yeah.
Um, so take that kind of like fear, because I felt like maybe that's where that could have went without some explanation.
Yeah.
Um,
No, like I said, it's a thing where you get used to. Melissa and I weren't like born, like I said, into you're given this honor of being close to death. It's an affinity and it's something you develop. Um, when I was 12, I would have never thought about working with cemetery spirits. They were too big, they were too powerful, no. 16, I think, is the first time I collected my first batch of graveyard dirt. And then when I was like 24, I started working with Santa Muerte. And she served her purpose. She came, she went. She seems like she's coming back again. So it's kind of like a revolving door. And the more, you go in and go out, you become more familiar.
mhm. Well, I mean, deities and even some ancestors, right? Depending on what you're going through, what you need, you're going to get different ones,
Oh, yeah.
So it's not always just the same two. You might have one or two that are kind of with you all the time, like your best friends, that favorite grandma, that favorite aunt, that favorite cousin. But some of those extras are going to come and go as what's needed, the situation, what you need to learn, what you need the bonk on the head for. Um, yeah, homegrown's like, I was always in the graveyard as a kid too.
Yeah, it's an affinity,
Yeah, they're quiet. I enjoy the artwork on some of the old tombstones and the carvings and the mausoleums. And I never really got into the whole like the grave rubbings, because I'm like, that's more shit I got to carry around. But to go read them was nice.
My ancestors, so I didn't realize this. So when I started digging through my ancestors' names, a lot of them are buried in this area way more than I thought would be. And because of my last name and how like unique it is in the area, it was pretty easy for me to find people. But I found one. It was on like Find a Grave or something like that, findagrave.com or something like that. And it had one of those old Victorian, and it's in my city, it's in Clyde. It had one of those old like skulls with the wings, like the 1800s headstones.
Nice.
Yeah.
I
Faded to shit, but it was there.
Still there. I kind of like was bummed when I would find like a new graveyard for me, right? Hadn't been in it, and it would be a newer one, and all of the monuments would be the flat plaques, slightly recessed. So when the keepers would come around, they could just lawn mow right over it and not have to maneuver around. And I'm like, I get it for efficiency, but blah.
Yeah.
Like, how can you represent Grandpa George here with just a flat little square piece of metal?
So I collect graveyard dirt, which is different than grave dirt, which is different than cemetery dirt.
Mm-hmm.
It's an iron graded graveyard, and that's where at the gate I collect graveyard dirt. But there are two cemeteries where I live, and the one has General James B. McPherson in it. He has a monument, he has a mausoleum. And so he could be regarded as a folk saint. And so like if I ever wanted to do protection work, or he was called General Bullseye McPherson as the nickname, because he fired with like extreme accuracy. So for hitting your target, I could ask him for stuff. But the other one close to me is in the town next door, and it's an obelisk. And I think 2 or 3 times I went there to recite a rosary as like an offering that I was doing. It wasn't until the 3rd time, I don't know why I was attracted to this obelisk, I just was. It wasn't until like the 3rd time when I got in the car and started going around the drive that took me like around the obelisk, that I saw on the side, which doesn't face the road or anything. It faces like the side. It doesn't face The back end of the cemetery, the front end, it faces the left side of the cemetery. It said STEM. That town historically was named STEMtown. So that was the grave of the founder. And I did not know that until after the fact. But yeah.
Homegrown. It's like I went on a tour of graveyard in Rochester and I took off onto an unforgotten part and found family plot with our name on it, and it was from the 1700s. That's really cool. I haven't ran across any of my people randomly, and I'm sure if I really went looking, I probably could. And I'm trying to message my friend Rhonda, who's in West Virginia. She was the one who would go graveyard hopping with me, and we would purposely just drive around at night, sneak it in, just to go investigate and sit and listen to the quiet.
How many people are watching this right now?
Huh?
How many people are watching this right now?
About 13.
Oh, okay. I feel comfortable with that number. You guys want to know something about me? Are you all consenting to me dumping a little bit of info about me?
Trauma dump. Come on.
It's not trauma, but it's like, this might not be for everyone's ears. One of the things on my bucket list, because I was talking about sex, death, and magic, is to sneak into a graveyard during a new moon and have sex. It's like one of the ultimate offerings to the spirits of death that I want to give them. I'm not saying anyone should do that. I'm just saying, if you come across a news story... Oh, what?
I said, stop making me have to mute and go cough a lot up.
So if you all come across a news story of someone being caught in the act in a graveyard, it was likely me. Especially where you live, because there's a lot of cemeteries that I like around where you live. Like
out in Lorain County?
Yeah. That place is, that area just in general where you live is just littered with cemeteries.
You said littered with cemetery. That's not littered. Yeah, Hunger's like, that would be awesome.
A new moon, because a full moon, like, it's easier for you to be seen. A new moon, there's not any natural light, so
yeah.
That's not for magical reasons, that's for practical reasons.
Yeah, I'm asking Rhonda. So one of our nights that we were out and about, we were just kind of walking through, and it was one that we had been to before, and I think it was around the Amherst area. We're just walking along, and all of a sudden I'm like, what is that over there? Because we would go at night, like in the dark, and you're younger, you better eyesight than you have now, and I'm like, what is that? And so we go walking over there, and they had exhumed a grave, and like casket is sitting there, and it was like partially, and I'm like, oh, do I want to look in there? I don't know if I want to look in there. And I'm like, but I want to get close to it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now I'm creeped out, we can go.
Depending on like when that person was buried, they're either gonna just be bones or they're gonna be preserved incredibly well, because like there was this during Easter, someone tweeted, your God isn't real and one day you're gonna rot in a hole. And I'm like, well, first of all, we cannot prove that God is real or isn't real. And secondly, no one's rotting in a hole because of all of the embalming fluid we have. We can still exhume bodies and they still look like the day they went into the ground, so.
Seeing if she remembers. I want to say it was in the Amherst area, but it was not Crown Hill. We would go to Crown Hill just because that whole place it's beautiful yet creepy, just in the way it's set up. Maybe it was South Amherst. Now everybody's like, Crystal Cat was like, me and a friend were out driving around late and saw people hooking up under a bridge.
See, I'm not trying to be a bridge troll. There's a bridge I have like the other town over where I could sneak under, but I don't want that. The Sandusky River is kind of gross, so. Homegrown's like, oh my God, yes. I did an internship there. Still can't beat.
I think we have gotten way off topic now. Thanks, Zach. I'm gonna reel your ADD back onto track here before somebody accidentally incriminates themselves. Where were we?
You were in a graveyard.
Oh, hey, that's pretty cool, Nanette. She's like, my mom's family's in Crown Hill. That's pretty cool. Then you are familiar. You've been there. The real, like, big one as you first come in. It's kind of like the Dominion one. Like, it feels like it rules the rest of the land there. And looks like too late. Yeah, Zach already said it would be me. But Crown Hill, and I've thought about like doing a live out there with it, because it, like I said, it's pretty, especially in like an overcast day. But after a certain point, there's just this ominous kind of feel that will come down to it, and it's not necessarily like evil or anything, but it shifts. And in the very beginning, it was like, ooh, creepy. Now I'm like, what is this? And
there is one kind of like really old, I don't even think it's like a functional cemetery anymore, and it's probably only like 75 to 100 graves, and it's on a hill, and so it's like the top part are the graves, and then there's like 2 mausoleums that are like set into the hill. And one Halloween night it was the Halloween where there was a full moon, which doesn't happen like often. It happens like every 60 years or something. It was the Halloween where it was on Halloween night, it was a full moon. So I think it was like 2016 or something like that. But my friend Jess and I went there, and we did a Ouija board. We had a Ouija board with us.
Breaking all the rules.
Breaking
all those rules.
Yeah. That night confirmed for me a lot. Some cemeteries are quite literally just resting places. There's nothing inherently magical about them. Sometimes they're all asleep. Any spirits there, asleep. No one wants to talk. No one wants to interact. They're just in eternal equipoise there. And I think that's fine. I think that's okay. Not every cemetery needs to be this active place, this vortex. Sometimes they are simply just a resting place.
So I had taken pictures recently. And so when you're first coming in, this is what you see.
Okay.
And that mausoleum up there, it's actually much more bigger, obviously, than the picture, but it even feels bigger than that. And you have to drive past it in either direction to get to the rest of the cemetery. And my God, there was a man that just hangs out there, kind of like keeping dominion. And like that's a center part, just that tree in the center of it, towards the back. It's a really cool cemetery. And that's another really cool looking tree. I used to do a lot of photography in cemeteries because they're just cool looking. But that first mausoleum as you're coming in, it just, if you couldn't get it past there, like you might as well just turn on it. Like you are not going to have a good time in there.
Yeah.
Nanette's like, don't worry, Zach, we won't tell about your new moon sex.
I think I'm smart about it. I don't think I'll get caught. If it happens. It's a bucket list thing. We'll see.
Crystal Cat says, one time when I was a kid, my grandpa was in the hospital, but when he came to see me and he was going to a new home, he wouldn't be back here. I told him my grandpa was not coming back. So, let's see. Graham's like, yes, empty in a sort of way to me that is peaceful. It's nice to know that there's not unrestful, energy still there. Like everybody's cool, calm. They've moved on.
Yeah.
And he died around that time.
I think I've only successfully predicted 2 deaths in the entire time that I've ever read. And it was always like, it was never a surprise. The person, one of them was Savannah, actually. The other individual, like, they're like, yeah, he's actively in hospice. And I was like, okay, then, yeah, you don't need me to tell you this. You already know what's going to happen.
Right. Without really realizing it, like the last time that I saw my paternal grandmother, like I went up around her birthday and was sat and talked with her. And I thought it was funny because she was sitting outside in the evening and she had lupus. And I'm just kind of like, this is not where you ought to be sitting. At least it's overcast. And sat and talked. And she was going through some memories that I haven't heard her recant before. Or retell, I should say. And I'm like, this is interesting. And it was just kind of like this feeling and this knowing. And I'm like, this is the last time I'm talking with her. And when I got up and left, I purposely turned around and took a picture of her just kind of sitting there in peace, just in her mind, you know, enjoying the evening in the quiet. And I'm like, this is my last picture of her. And sure enough, it was like a week or so later, like when I went to go see her, it was because she was on her way out. The hospice nurses were there and she looked so different. And, you know, I'm like, I'm glad I listened and got that picture and listened to her stories that evening. It wasn't like, oh, gotta go. It was like, no, this is important to sit here and spend that time with her because there will not be another time.
My family's stubborn. They don't die easily, and when they do, it's like out of nowhere. It's like no one saw that coming.
Crystal Cat says, I guess I talked to a lot of random people in the hospital and the graveyard as a kid, you know, people that were there. People tended to avoid me when I was there because I was the all black goth person walking around and nobody wanted to talk to that. So, which was fine with me because I'm like, I don't want to talk to you either. I'm enjoying chilling in my space, you know. The term I see dead people has been used so much as a joke, only if they knew the truth, right?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, if you've ever spent time in a hospice building, it's a lot. When my dad was in hospice, the first hour that I was there, I saw black smoke come out of one room and then just like go down the hallway, like along like the top of the wall, where the top of the wall meets the ceiling, like that crevice. I saw this with my dad, and I think I saw it with some other patient, like who was like either next door or like 2 rooms away from him. You know when heat comes off of the pavement, it's kind of like that clear but like shaky, like rings or like layers. I saw that with my dad and this other individual when they were like sleeping. And I deduced that it was probably like them dipping their toes into the water of the next world before like fully committing. But yeah, it kind of looked like Wi-Fi rays like coming off of like their head. Like it was like that those heat waves like coming off. There were some rooms I would look in and it's like it felt very peaceful and you could tell like the person there had passed very easily. And then there were some rooms where it was almost like it was dense. It felt tense going in there, passing. It's like that one struggled. Being around the dead, it takes a very specific kind of person.
One of my other colleagues, Lachelle, she's like, you know, we need to go do and train to be like a death doula. And I'm like, I don't have the time to properly dedicate to it, but maybe down the road.
That's something I want to do.
Oh, well, thank you. Love the gifted talented here tonight and everybody in chat as well. Crystal Cat says, I still don't go to graveyards or hospitals even now if I can help it because of the way they feel.
Oh yeah, like I said, it takes a very specific kind of person to like deal with that heaviness.
Like graveyards, cemeteries, they don't bother me. Hospitals can, but I have childhood issues of being in the hospital for many years. I'm not a fan of doctors or needles. I don't care how many piercings I have, that's different.
Yeah.
Um,
People say that all the time. Like, I'll be getting IV. I pass out at every. If it's an IV or blood draw, you have to lay me down. And they're like, but you have such pretty tattoos and like you have piercings. I'm like, those are not the same.
mhm.
Not the same.
Those were chosen. And still, like, it takes me a while, which it's been a long time since I've gotten a new piercing. I have no tattoos. My skin's so overly sensitive. I'm sure, like, within the first so many minutes, we're going to have a problem. So I'm not even going to test that. But when it comes for a piercing, I'm sitting there for a few months, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm like, I'm going to do it. Now, though, here lately, because of like allergy shots to hopefully ward this type of stuff off, and weekly inject. Now I'm just kind of like, But that hospital smell, that disinfectant, carpet, scrub, that whole thing blended together, and I'm like,
yeah. None of that really bothered me. I mean, I worked in healthcare for a year or two, so like, I kind of. Anything that may have bothered me, I got really used to. I mean, in that I like walked into someone who had just passed, like their body was still warm. Like you could tell half their body that they were exposed was like cold, and then like the part that she was laying on was still warm because of the insulation from the bed and everything.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I said, I'm way too okay with death.
Oh, so Brooke has an interest in being a death doula, and Annette says, after experiencing what I did with my dad, and as much as my grandma wants to pass, I have been thinking of death doula.
Yeah.
Your little grandma, I'd love to meet her. It's funny, not funny, and I shouldn't laugh, but she's so ready to go that she's just saying and doing funny things, and I think half joking, but like she's very, very serious.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, I get it. I'm tired of being on this damn planet too, but I've got a while yet, I think.
People will always be quick to say like, you're guaranteed two things in death, or you're guaranteed two things in life, and that's death and taxes. And like they'll be okay with paying taxes, even if it's begrudgingly. But you're gonna die. You need to be okay with that. You need to confront your death. You need to confront your finality, your mortality. There are so many people I know that like are terrified, and they just like, it's out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. And I don't like that for them. The other like guarantee in life is change, and that change can come in the manifestation of like a quick death, a sudden death, and so dealing with like your own death is something I think should be paramount in everyone's life. And sadly, it's not. I can't hear you. I think your mic is still muted.
Sorry, yeah, coughing.
There you go.
Homegrown says, I have inquiry for James Adams Psych Ward in Perrysburg. If they let me, anyone want to go? Hey, I might want to go. Like,
yeah, that's just like 2-3 towns away from me.
Oh, well, I'll pick you up on the way, buddy.
Yeah, Perrysburg is. So there's me, Fremont, Gibsonburg, Perrysburg.
Yes. How many times can you die in a current lifetime? And some people that have multiple.
Yeah, as many times as your body lets you come back.
Yeah. I think your physical ability, right, depending, and your mental ability. Some of us are just too damn stubborn.
Yeah.
Says, as a nurse, I didn't like to float to the cancer unit. I saw an Earthbound, but I didn't know it. I didn't know it until the nurses in the unit told me that night. I avoided that room.
One of my friends works at a local hospital, and they have like the old wing, as they call it, and it's mostly just like storage. I think the chapel is there. There's a couple administrative offices there, I think. But he will go in there she's not someone who disbelieves, but she doesn't particularly believe either. But she's like, I don't like going in there. She goes, I've never seen anything or heard anything, but you feel like despondency, like sadness going in there. And I was like, how much of that is like anyone who's died in there, and more of it just being this is an abandoned part of the building and the building's sentience, like I believe buildings can be sentient. How much of it is just like that's a neglected space and so it's sad, you know?
Well, I too believe that buildings can like have a consciousness, right? And my old house, it was just me and my son by the time we were leaving. It's a big house. There were rooms not being used, and I would make a point to go sit in those rooms to put the energy in it. Because I'm like, it's always the houses that are abandoned that start falling apart. And you would think they would stay pristine because nobody's running around, nobody's slamming doors, nobody's color. But no, they start falling apart because there's not that liveliness, you know, given to it. So I would purposely go like, okay, let's go sit in this extra bedroom that nobody's been in for 6 months.
Yeah.
So my house is its own entity, right? And the land of that town is its own little freaking personality. A little bit of smart.
There are parts of Ohio I won't go to because the towns themselves, I'm like, I can't explain it. I tell my friends this all the time. I'm like, I don't like going there. There's no logical reason for me to dislike it. I just don't like those parts of Ohio. They make me feel a certain way and I don't want to be there.
Now kind of going back to I had to visit my dad in the VA, the Lewis Stokes building, right? A few years back. And when you mentioned like seeing like that black smoky thing, it made me remember back. What was that movie? Not Gremlins, the ones where they were like the spiky little, it was like the Gremlins knockoff. Like spiky little balls. Like the little energy drains that were running around in this hospital, like feeding off of the mental trauma the men and women were going through. Critters, thank you. It was almost, and it kind of became that question for me, which came first, were those little critter-like things exacerbating? You know, were they feeding? Were they the cause? And so, you know, anytime that I would go visit my dad, like I'd be sitting there visiting physically with him and talking, but like I was also kind of like clearing, you know, that ward out. And I'm like, you have no right to be here doing this. Like they have enough problems with you exacerbating it.
Yeah.
Like this whole hospital needs, you know, help. But and I started noticing, like, of course you had vets that were just constantly pacing because they're locked, they're still there. And some of them would start slowing down when they would pass my chair. And a couple of them would stop, and instead of immediately about facing and leave, they would just kind of stand there for a minute. I'm like, that's fine. You take all that you need. That's why we're here. And, you know, we're going to go get that thing down there and like get off this floor, get out of here. But that kind of really started kicking the whole, like, I need to, or I don't need to be, but I'm like, I want to be in the VA.
Yeah.
With these vets doing this energy work. Because one of those visits, there was a holy man, I will not say which religion, who was sitting there with one of the patients out in the, and I thought it was weird. Cause I'm like, why are you out here where the family has to wait? Because you're not allowed to go into those rooms. Doing his spiritual consultation in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my business what he is saying to you. And it came down to just pretty much survivor's guilt. Like, he saw all of his buddies die, and it was like him and maybe 2 others that survived. And just this guilt. And he's like, why not me? Blah, blah, blah. And the only thing this holy man could say, and I was so furious, was he was patting his hand and he's like, it's God's will. It's God's will. You did your job. And I'm like, you are doing nothing for him. You are not helping relieve that guilt. You are not pulling that energy off. You are of no service. Why are you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm like, they need so much better help, but I'm too weird. They won't let me in. So I'm like, fine, I guess I just have to go volunteer to play checkers. Just do the work unannounced.
if you become a death doula, see, that's the thing with when it comes to like caring for the dead. There are different ways you can go about it and get away with it in Ohio, especially because of the lack of professionals to fill certain positions.
Right.
Like I'm still looking at a chaplaincy. There's like 3 different ways I could go about being a chaplain, and they're very loosely related. Like I could either go to seminary, for my case it would be doing the 3-year retreat. I could become a social worker, or I could become a psychologist. I could also, if I really wanted, become a death doula. Tell them that I am recognized by the state of Ohio as an ordained minister, and they'd be like, well, we need a per diem chaplain. If you can get what is it called, pastoral care, clinical pastoral education, you can do it.
I might have to look into that. Dear VA, am I still too weird?
Yeah.
And you're right, Homegrown. Cleveland Clinic does hire Reiki specialists, and thanks to Alice Langholt, she used to work for Cleveland Clinic, and she kind of got that ball rolling it with like the practical Reiki and stuff, which is, you know, the no hand positions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the VA is finally starting to embrace that in some of their radial clinics as well, so it's not so, you know, foo-foo for them.
Cleveland Clinic definitely triggered a lot of that movement with the Ohio hospitals, because at Bellevue, they offer it as a volunteer thing. They do it like, I think, every other Monday or something like that. And at Firelands, they have like people who are hired on just as like Reiki people. Like they are supportive medicine.
Yeah, I want to say a lot of Cleveland Clinic nurses, like that has become part of continuing education.
Yeah.
So there's a lot
when I took my Reiki classes, it was taught by an RN who had her BSN, and every class that we took was considered 6 continuing education hours, 6 CE hours.
So it's cool that it's becoming more accepted and not so like just brush it off. It's weird. Hey Omni, let's do a quick hello and shout out here. It's been a minute since I tried knocking on the VA door, so it might be time to try again. Because I have a colleague who is a nurse with the VA, and she's like, try this name, try this phone number, ask for this person, and it would always go nowhere. But it might be time again, because I'll knock a few times and then I'll stop, because I'm like, well, I don't want to go on a banned list for too weird. So it might be time to knock on that door.
I mean, even if it was volunteer, it's like they don't have to pay you anything, so what can they lose, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, I think they would benefit, but the fact that they're already starting to like actually put the sign up on the wall behind them is a really good start. So maybe that's one thing we all have to start kind of doing. Because I do think that the VA is probably some of the better care for the vets versus some of the civilian hospitals, just because they know what to expect in a way.
It's informed.
But there is still so much more that needs to happen for them. And just watching and listening to them, I seem to collect them without even trying. I'm like, oh, you too, great, come tell me your story. Like you can't shock me. I've heard a lot.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And some of them will even start spilling, and they're like, I haven't told anybody that. I don't know why. You're comfortable to talk to. And I'm like, just keep talking, let it out. We're just gonna set this out.
There are some people who just naturally are like that, and whether that's just their demeanor or the stuff that they've been through in life, because I get that. People have told me before, they're like, you make situations not awkward, or you're very comfortable to be around and you're very easy to talk to. And then lo and behold, in some capacity, we're usually in the spiritual community doing healing in some way.
Well, and kind of circling back, right? Back to the ancestor, back to the healing, back to the, that could be something to find in an ancestral path. Like, how many people in that path have done that work?
And you have to have a very good eye for that, because especially with like my grandparents, my grandpa, it was very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
He was a drummer for powwows, and so like he already knew a lot of that stuff. My grandmother, devout Protestant, non-denominational Christian.
Mm-hmm.
She is what in Mexico they would call an oracionista, which is someone who just by prayer alone affects change.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to call her a witch or a curandera, she'd be like, no, it's God. It's just God.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a very good eye. Like, she's a healer, but
Mm-hmm.
she's not a healer.
Right. Well, and it's great that there wasn't that ego, right? It wasn't like, look what I can do. It was.
Well, that's the other thing. My grandma is definitely not problematic. I don't talk to her anymore because of how toxic she can be. So that's the other thing. People who do have gifts,
Mm-hmm.
they can be very rough around the edges.
They're human.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, look at me.
Oh my God. We don't have any more time to get into all of that. You're one of my problematic leaders. I'm like, where are you going? You have another meeting. You're off topic again. I spend more time. You're like that I'm like, oh, he's the brother I never wanted. Here he is. We were related at some point in a past life.
Likely. What is that? I asked Greg the one time, I was like, we were related in a past life, weren't we? I was like, she was my mother. She was my mother and I was her son. And he's like, no, you got yourself killed. And she had to make sure you didn't do that repeatedly. He said something about there were several lifetimes where like we were battle buddies or something. And like you were always the one who had to make sure I didn't go get myself killed every time.
I mean, it's probably still the thing. Let's see. Homegrown says, I remember even living with my great grandparents, and I can remember things. But how do you know about even further back in the ancestral line? Sometimes we found out. But what happens if you can't? Yeah. So like if there are 5, 6, 7 generations back, how to call forth.
I love this saying. This goes for the ATRs, the traditional African religions. If you cannot name at least 7 generations backward, you have a lot of work to do, essentially. It boils down to you have a lot of work to do. If you have forgotten your ancestors, you've forgotten your roots. I think most people, given today's technology, and adoption aside, because that's a whole other thing to cover,
Mm-hmm.
If you can trace your family origins at least 7 generations back, you're doing good. And I think given today's technology, that's very possible to do. Now, in a spiritual sense, this is where your discernment comes in. If you're being told by this ancestor they're from like the 1600s, the 1500s or something, well, do you believe that? Are your other ancestors verifying that?
Mm-hmm.
That's something you have to discern.
Brooke. Like, no. That's our no emoji. I know so far, but I can't say that I would know 7, right? But then again, I also think, given how I operate in today's standard of life, right? Beliefs, society, versus what some of them would have done, like, if we coexisted at the same time, we would not have been close people.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, there hasn't been this need to go so far back anyway. Because I'm just kind of like, great grandma wouldn't have liked. So
Oh, definitely.
we'll leave that alone.
I tell people this story kind of often. When I was researching the German side of my family, I stumbled across a last name and I was like, we're going to stop right there because I don't need to know anymore and I don't want to know anymore. It was the last name Goebbels.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't want confirmation. Even if it's not, I don't want it. I do not want confirmation that I'm related to one of the worst doctors in Auschwitz. I don't need that. That does no good for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not an endeavor where I wish to elevate that ancestor. That is not my space to be doing that. That is for the Jewish people to determine. That is for them to recite Kaddish. That is for them to recite the Yahrzeit prayer and the Zikor. That is not for me to try and elevate that spirit.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Homegrown says, I can trace back more than 12 back, but there's a gap between 1500 and 1300. So what would be the discernment?
So if they're saying they're from that era, the discernment is asking your other ancestors, like, can you verify this? Because they're all living in the same world on the other side. And so again, that comes to your intuition, the development you have with your ancestors, the trust you have with them, how well you trust your intuition, how well you trust the mouthpiece that you've developed with them. Aside from like requesting records from Europe, the discernment is all intuitive.
Mm-hmm. Can you verify that was your mom? Can you verify that was your dad?
Yeah.
The
other thing is, if ancestors start popping up, another part of discernment is this going to help me? You know, are they just popping up to say hello? Are they popping up because they want something and it's something you don't really have time for or don't really want to do? You don't have to engage with them.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that's living. It's your life that's being affected. They've lived theirs, they're dead. It's entirely up to you. You get to call the shots in that. You get to be like, sure, I'll listen. Sure, I'll help you. Sure, I'll make a deal with you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can be like, no, I don't want to. Simply because you don't want to. You're allowed to simply not want to.
Right.
No is a complete sentence. And you do not have to justify it. If you feel you don't want to, no.
Let's see. Oh, we're getting close to 9 o'clock already. It seemed to go by kind of quick.
Yeah, if anyone has questions, I still have my cards and dice out.
So yeah, we'll wait for some more questions. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping. Wrapping up, not wrapping. I cannot wrap, nor will I even try. But yeah, lost my train of thought live. It's great. Let's see, make sure I did not miss anybody's anything.
I'm gonna turn my light on. Hold on. Maybe.
Maybe, Brooke. Maybe.
You hear all the jars?
Who do you have? Never mind. I don't want to know who's in a jar.
No one's in a jar.
I like plausible deniability. Jars at the ready.
My song powder, because I was adding to it while we were talking.
Right? Yeah. Everybody now, like all the cemeteries now, are gonna have security guards looking for you, Zach.
I mean, if they want to join, Orgies in a Graveyard sounds like a great fun time, right?
Oh my God! Shush your mouth.
Bring that nightstick over here.
I'm gonna mute you. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we entertained. Gosh, your face. Glad we kept you awake on your drive. We're gonna talk over Zach while I mute him. I'm
a fun time.
Oh my God, he's so inappropriate in public. Y'all think I'm bad. He's when I have to be the censor, you know it's bad.
And this is me incredibly dialed down.
Yeah,
What is with the Scorpio in my life? Girl, what's with the Scorpio in my life? Okay. What's going on with the Scorpio in this individual's life? Ha! That's funny. That was not intentional. I really wish I had like a camera to show that like that was not intentional. So El Alacran usually represents sneakiness. It's like it's don't fuck with me, I won't fuck with you. At the same time, it's like underhandedness. So it's things done in stealth. And it's kind of the message of like pick and choose your battles and don't make enemies if you don't have to. Like if someone's being a problem and you can just like remove yourself from the situation, that's better than engaging.
Quit instigating, Karen. I'm gonna drag you out with me to go corral them.
Okay, 11. Okay. So this is either help from a relative or a friend, or it could be a possible new romance. So I don't know if this is like someone you're talking to. It could become romance. So coupled with El Alacran, this kind of shows like maybe this person has ulterior motives that you don't know about, and those ulterior motives aren't they want to end up in a relationship. They may want, I don't think it's so much as far as like they want money or they want, anything like that. I think it's they just want companionship maybe, and like you're willing to give that. But in the end, it's like it's just because they don't want to be lonely. It's not so much that they have an end game. They're using you, but they're not using you in necessarily a financially harmful sense, a physical harmful sense. It's you're convenient, and they want like emotional and psychological support. They're kind of like that draining friend. They want friendship, they want validation, they want emotional support, they want emotional labor. It's not that they want money or anything like that.
I don't think I've ever heard it referred to as emotional labor before.
Yeah.
But I like that. See, Karen, join Zach live on Twitch for his moon ritual. Quit instigating him.
That would be a great OnlyFans thing to do.
Shush. I'm just going to remove you completely from the stream. So help me if you get my channel banned, Zach. I'm coming to you. Yeah, it says they're very, very draining. That's why.
Yeah, I get the sense that it's like someone who their ulterior motive is just to use you as emotional labor. So it's kind of like a toxic friendship, toxic relationship, toxic whatever the situation is, toxic situationship. I don't think it's anything that's like too severe that will have lasting effects. It's make some boundaries, tell them what's what, kind of thing.
So if anybody has any last minute questions or comments or insights on anything we talked about, just go ahead and throw it in the comments. Let's talk on it. Otherwise we'll be wrapping up. Let's see. Now, Zach, like we said earlier, you'll be at the winery with us this Saturday.
Yes.
With Chris from 3 to 10. Poor bro. She's like, not all of us, not all Scorpios. So Zach will be out there. You'll be doing like tarot readings, energy cleansings. You tend to get more of the energy cleansings out there, and probably rightfully so, out there at the winery. So if you're local, you can come meet him in person. Help me corral him. Like if you keep him busy at his tent, I don't have to wonder where the hell he went when there's somebody looking for him for their reading. Like, oh, he is still where he needs to be. Oh, what does my aunt want on the altar? Rose water's coming to mind.
I was just gonna say something floral. Immediately, like flowers. Something about flowers. Yeah, I'm gonna say like flowers or maybe even perfume.
Mm-hmm. Especially if she had a favorite perfume, I'm sure you could probably go find that somewhere and just like mist it now and then.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like I started using rose water about a year after I started my practice. I still use the Florida water, but the rose water is like that feminine side element to it. And that was when I had been mailed by a great uncle of mine some pieces of hers.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I like added her in, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, now we need to use rose water. And it took a few days before the light bulb above my head went off. And it's like, oh yeah, her first name's Rose.
That makes sense. Do you use like rose water, like the baking kind, or do you use like the rose perfume?
The actual water that you could ingest or in your skin.
Oh, I was gonna say something about that. Oh, do you still have the little statue I gave you? I think it was.
Oh, the little Mary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She because of how that sits, and I've got the taller Mary from the name of just went out of my head. Anyway, she's there. So the other one sits on the other side, on either side of the feathers for West of Huayra. So they kind of hold that space. Why can I not think of the name of that church area?
Something about open hearts or something, or
I can drive you there right now. Why can't I see the name of it on the sign? But they have like visions and sightings of Mary all the time. But they are very open-minded. They let us do a lot of the shaman training there in their sacred spaces, and so they're very friendly bunch. I just do warn people that if you show up around 3, they're doing the rosary. And if you're within eyesight, like they wrap you up, like they scoop you by the arm and they're like, oh, come on, sweetie. And you're not going to tell this cute, adorable little nun that's like this tall. No. So sitting there, do the rosary. You are like, don't even go in for the bathroom at 3 o'clock. Like, just wait an hour. You can hold it.
One of my friends, their family friend is a nun, and she's always like, have you tried the rosary? That's like her slogan. That's her catchphrase for everything. She's always like, have you tried the rosary? There's actually a really good book if anyone's interested. It's called The Way of the Rose, and it's about like making the rosary your own, and it's about it's an honoring of the goddess. It could be Mary, it could be Tara, it could be Kuan Yin, it doesn't need to be Mary, but it's like a folk version of reciting the rosary. It's very interesting, but it's called The Way of the Rose.
Holy love.
There you go.
And they actually have a old-fashioned spring with the old like crank pump that you can just go get water, and that water is really good healing water. Do not drink it. It is not fit for drinking.
It's really good water.
Healing. It's got like really good energy in it. Right. So I used to do a clearing spray with it till I ran out everybody loved it. They're like, can you spray me with that stuff you make? And that was my base. Did you get that from Holy Love?
No. I want you to come out here at some point because I've told you this before. So next door to me is the Sulphur Spring. And they have like a fountain that is right at the source and you can like get water from. You can see some of the sulfur calcite precipitate in there. But yeah, it's marked with sulfur, the alchemical sign for sulfur. But yeah, you can get it used to be a healing spring, like well, I mean, it still is, but it's a natural spring. I think it's the world's largest sulfur spring. You can get water from there. It's reputed to be healing, and a colleague of ours made war water once with it because it has sulfur. I think you know who I'm talking about. But yeah, so he's been there.
Yeah, I'll have to come out and see it.
I go there and I often give offerings to the Nagas and stuff because the land is kind of going into disrepair because no one officially owns it anymore.
So it's not even part of like a state park or anything? Nobody's up here?
It's a recognized Ohio landmark because it has that brown sign in the shape of Ohio with like the Buckeyes at the top, and it gives the blurb about what it was and what it is and like how the Seneca revered it as like a healing place and how it had history as like a health spa and stuff. I wouldn't be shocked, especially in this area. This area has a very brief history, but history of spiritualists, the spiritualist movement of the 1800s. And that spring, when it was a health spa, I believe was frequented often by spiritualists passing through. And just down the road is where I grew up and used to live. And that house was very likely one of like the health spa houses where you could like stay.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to. I should go out there, see how far it is, maybe put together some sort of like little field trip through the store, like stop at the two springs and but just to make a point real quick, the Holy Love, like, you know how most churches are very male energy centered, right? This one is a very feminine energy driven, and I shouldn't really say driven, but it's all about her energy, that feeling with it. So it's a nice different shift. And like I said, they're very open-minded of all denominations. Nobody's going to come preach at you that you're going to some sort of hell. But the water there is very nice. And they got all of these cute little chapels that you can go to. And that's where I argued with her. I argued with Mary. She won. She's on my freaking Mesa. Hey, Chris. We were just wrapping up a conversation about working with ancestors and stuff. So, but thanks for popping in. And it's funny because whenever I think I'm going to raid somebody out or out to them, they end up showing in the stream. And I'm like, well, now I can't raid to you because here you are. Hello, friend.
I have Guadalupe everywhere because this just comes with the territory of being Mexican. She's over here. I have her right here. Oh, she's falling. Right there. And then she's over on the wall. And then she's somewhere over there. She's everywhere.
She's all the places.
It's funny because she's right next to my little liquor bottles.
Probably having a nighttime sip. Well, thanks everybody for stopping in for what ended up being mostly a chat. Which is okay, right? Because everybody says it's been interesting. So this is something else that we were planning on kind of doing eventually on these evenings. So it may not always be readings, but you know, we started out that way and then we went off on a tangent road, and it's been a pleasant, entertaining tangent road, I think. Home says, I love the energy. Thank you for letting me be. Well, thank you for listening and being part of the conversation and helping move conversation along, so it's not just me or Zach rambling on forever on something to fill the quiet. But yeah, 7:00 p.m. Wednesday nights, Eastern Standard Time. We continue the Woo Woo Wednesday with discussions, talks, readings, all sorts of stuff. Brooke should be back with us next week. Sandy in a couple weeks. And who knows what we'll do that night. But you got any last safe parting words?
Well, I mean, what's safe? I mean, that one's obviously use a condom, but...
Oh my God. See, here we go. I'm going to yell at you. Just yell at you all the time.
Get tested often.
Oh my God. Shush your face. How to work with ancestors properly, sir. Let's keep it on topic.
There's not really a proper way. There are traditions. At the very least, if you can write down a list of the names and light a candle for them, they'll start showing up. If you don't know the names, just call out to the ancestors on my mother's side, the ancestors on my father's side, those of love and integrity. You know, please make your presence known.
Oh. Right? I keep forgetting I made it and I keep forgetting. No. Well, thank you, everybody. And you're right, Karen, safety first. I think we're going to raid on over to E-Room. He has been a very supportive friend of the stream. Sometimes is able to join us on the Wednesday mornings. And yeah, start asking your mom now. And I wish I would have asked my grandmother even more stuff, because she had some of that information of some of the ancestors and stuff, like still over in Ireland and Scotland. And when I was younger, I'm like, I'll get it later. Later never came, and now I'm missing out. So start asking her those questions now. And really, I've been like thinking like I need to get my dad one of those 23andMe kits too. I'm like, here, spit in this. Let's see where we're going.
I need to get one for my mom and my sister because my dad's dead, so I can't very well, get any DNA from him without going through a bunch of red tape to get him exhumed. But yeah, I need to get my mom tested and my sister tested. Everything that came back on mine was expected except the 3% Scandinavian part. That was the only one I was like, that one I don't know about. That one I don't know where that came from.
Well, it makes kind of sense because you have German. So, close enough in the area. I'm really interested on my dad's side because there's some questionable bloodlines of who's legitimate and who's not.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let's see what we find out here. Maybe I finally have one of those fun stories where, there's somebody you didn't know closer related,
I'm like, genetically related to a lot of people in this area, but that's because my great-grandfather was one of like 7 to 9 half siblings. So,
right. Chris, I went down a rabbit hole the other night and went back to the 1700s. It was pretty cool to see a little bit about them. And Brooke's like, I may find extra siblings if I do that. So, I'm like, what's going on the dad's side? Because my grandma's gone, and like her husband died like when my dad was like 14. So like, and now that she's gone, like I kind of missed it, right? So yeah, I got to get it while he's here. But thank you again, everybody, for being here and being part of the conversation and making it a safe space for everybody that wants to chat and listen. We are going to go over to E-Room because, like I said, he has been a very big supporter and friend of us and likes to send people over to us and talks about it a lot. So we give him some love. So even if you don't hang in there for very long, just kind of go in there, show him some love. Let's help support him back. And right now they're doing words on stream. So if you are a words person, Scrabble person, jump in, and he gets really, really excited when we keep moving up because I played with him and it's adorable how excited he gets when we beat levels. So we're gonna go visit E-Room here in a few seconds. So thank you everybody for joining.